Are you ready, Wendy? You want to read a story? Which one shall we read? Well, what's the name of it? What?
Jack and the Beanstalk.
Here we go. Let me sit down beside you, all right? Can we put that right there? And I'll just hop around here and knock over the television. Uh-oh. Can you scoot your buns up a little? There we go.
Oh no.
You lost the page? Well, we'll fight it. Scoot up a little bit and we'll fight it. Scoot up. Scoot up. Are you stuck? Are you unstuck? Scoot up this way. Scoot up this way. There we go. There we go. Oh, we got our buns together. Now, why don't you hop right up here on my lap? Now, you find the page, okay? Let's see if we can find the page. Try 164. Let's see if we can find 164. That's 224. 200. 180. 170. 168. 160. There it is. Jack and the Beanstalk. A long, long time ago, when most of the world was young, and people did what they liked because all things were good, there lived a boy named Jack. Jack's father was sick. He was really sick. And his mother, who was a good woman, she was busy every morning and late every evening, planning and figuring out how to support her sick husband and her young son by selling the milk and the butter which Milky White, their beautiful cow, gave them without problem every day. For it was summertime. But when winter came, the grass of the fields was killed by the frost. And though his mother sent Jack out in the woods to get what he could find for the cow to eat, he came back as often as not with a very empty sack. You know why? Because Jack's eyes usually were looking at other things. He was just wondered about everything. He wondered about the trees and the sky, where things came from, and sometimes he'd just forget to work. And so it came to pass one morning that Milky White gave no milk at all, not one drop. The poor, good, hard-working mother threw her apron over her head and she cried, "What shall we do? What shall we do?" Now Jack loved his mother. Besides, he felt just a little sneaky at being such a big boy and doing so little to help. So he said, "Cheer up, Mom, cheer up. I'll go and work someplace." He felt as if he could work his fingers to the bone. But his mother knew better. She shook her head. "Jack, you've tried before, and nobody would keep you. You're a good boy. But you get to daydreaming and thinking about other things. No, we must sell Milky White and live on the money we get from selling her. It's no use crying over milk when there's not even any here to spill." You see, she was wise as well as a hard-working woman. And Jack's spirits rose. "Well, okay, we'll sell Milky White, and we'll be richer than ever. It's market day today, so I'll just take her there and we'll see what we can get." "But," his mother said. "But doesn't butter parsnips," laughed Jack. "Trust me to make a good bargain." So, as it was wash day, and with her sick husband more sick than usual, Mom sent Jack off to sell the cow. "Don't get less than $10, she bawled after him as he turned the corner. $10, indeed. Jack had made up his mind to get 20. 20 gold dollars. He was just settling what he should buy for his mother as a surprise out of the money when he saw a queer little old man on the road who called out, "Good morning, Jack." "Good morning," replied Jack, with a polite bow, wondering how the queer little old man happened to know his name. Yeah, a lot of guys are named Jack. Maybe that was it. "And where may you be going?" asked the queer little old man. Jack wondered again. He was always wondering, remember? You know, what the queer little old man had to do with it. But, being polite, he replied, "I'm going to the market to sell Milky White, and I mean to make a good bargain." "So you will, so you will," chuckled the queer little old man. "You look like the sort of chap for it. I bet you know how many beans make 5." "Two in each hand and one in my mouth," answered Jack readily. He was really sharp as a needle. Just so," chuckled the queer little old man, and as he spoke he drew out of his pocket 5 beans. "Well, here they are, so give us Milky White." Jack was so surprised as he stood with his mouth open as though he were going to pop one of those beans to fly right into it. "What?" he said at last. "My Milky White cow for 5 common beans? Not if I can help it." "But they aren't common beans," put in the queer little old man, and there was a queer little smile on his queer little face. "If you plant these beans overnight, by morning they will have grown up right into the sky." Jack was flabbergasted. He was too flabbergasted to open his mouth. His eyes opened instead. "Did you say right up into the very sky?" he asked at last. For you see, Jack had really wondered about the sky more than anything else. "Right up into the very sky," repeated the queer old man, with a nod between each word. "It's a good bargain, Jack, and it's fair. It's fair as a jewel. If they don't, why, meet me right here tomorrow morning, and you will have Milky White right back again. Would that please you?" "Right as a trivet!" cried Jack, without stopping to think, and the next moment he found himself standing on an empty road. "Two in each hand and one in my mouth," repeated Jack. "That is what I said and what I'll do. Everything in order. And if that queer little old man wasn't right, I'll get Milky White back again tomorrow morning." So, whistling and munching the bean, he trudged home cheerfully, wondering what the sky would be like if he should ever get up there. "What a long time you've been gone!" exclaimed his mother, who was watching anxiously for him at the gate. "It is past sundown, but I see you've sold Milky White. Quick, tell me, how much did you get for her?" "You'll never guess," began Jack. "Lord a mercy, you don't say so," interrupted the good woman, "and I was worrying all day lest they should take you. What was it? $20? 15? It sure couldn't be $20." Jack held out his hand with the 4 beans left in it triumphantly. "There," he said, "that's what I got for her, and a jolly good bargain, too." It was the mother's turn to be flabbergasted, but all she said was, "What? Them beans?" "Yes," replied Jack, beginning to doubt his own wisdom, "but they're magic beans. If you plant them overnight, by morning they'll grow right up into the sky. Oh, Mamma, please don't hit me so hard." For Jack's mother for once had lost her temper, and was belaboring the boy for all she was worth. And when she had finished scolding and beating, she flung the miserable beans right out of the window, and sent him to bed without his supper. If this was the magical effect of the beans, thought Jack, he didn't want any more magic, if you please. However, being healthy and as a rule happy, he soon fell asleep, and he slept like a baby. When he woke he thought at first it was moonlight, for everything in the room showed green. Then he stared at the little window. It was covered as if with a curtain of leaves. He jumped out of bed in a trice, and the next minute, without waiting to dress, started climbing up the biggest beanstalk you ever saw. For what the queer little old man had said was true. One of the beans which his mother had chucked out the window into the garden had found soil and taken root, and grown in the night. Where? Up to the very sky? Jack meant to see at any rate, so he climbed, and he climbed, and he climbed. It was easy work, for the big beanstalk, with the leaves growing out of each side, was like a ladder. Pretty soon he was out of breath, but he got his second wind, and he was just beginning to wonder if he had a third wind, when he saw in front of him a wide, shining white road stretching away and away and away. So he started walking, and he walked, and he walked, and he walked. till he came to a tall, shining white house with a wide white doorstep. And on the doorstep stood a great big woman with a black porridge pot in her hand. Now Jack, having had no supper, was hungry as a hunter, and when he saw the porridge pot, he said quite politely, "Good morning, ma'am. I wonder if you could give me some breakfast." "Breakfast?" echoed the woman, who in truth was an ogre's wife. "If it's breakfast you'll be wanting, it's breakfast you'll likely be, for I expect my man home every instant, and there's nothing he likes better for breakfast than a fat boy grilled on toast." Now Jack was not a bit of a coward, and when he wanted a thing he generally got it, so he said cheerful like, "Well, I'd be fatter if I had my breakfast." Whereas the ogre's wife laughed and told Jack to come on in, for she was not really half as bad as she looked. But he had hardly finished the great bowl of porridge and milk she gave him when the whole house began to tremble and shake. It was the ogre coming home. Thump, thump, thump! "Into the oven with you, sharp!" cried the ogre's wife, and the iron oven door was just closed when the ogre strode in. Jack had seen him through the little peephole slide at the top where the steam came out. He was a big one for sure. He had 3 sheep strung to his belt, and he threw them down on the table and said, "Here, wife, roast me these snippets for breakfast. They're all I've been able to get this morning, worse luck. I hope the oven's hot." And he went to touch the handle, while Jack burst out with sweat, wondering what would happen next. "Roast!" echoed the ogre's wife. "Pooh! Those little things would dry to cinders. Better boil 'em." So she set to boil 'em, but the ogre began sniffing around the room. "They don't smell like mutton meat." Then he frowned horribly and began the real ogre's rhyme. "Fee, fi, fo, fum, I smell the blood of an Englishman. Be he alive or be he dead, I'll grind his bones to make my bread." "Don't be silly," said his wife. "It's it's the bones of the little boy you had for supper that I'm boiling down for soup. Come, eat your breakfast, there's a good ogre." So the ogre ate his 3 sheep, and when he was done he went into the big oaken chest and took out 3 bags of gold pieces. These he put on the table and began to count while his wife cleared away the breakfast things. By and by his head began to nod, and at last he began to snore, and he snored so loud that the whole house shook. Then Jack slipped out of the oven, and grabbing one of the bags of gold, he crept away, and ran along the straight, wide, shining white road as fast as his legs would carry him, till he came to the beanstalk. He couldn't climb down with the bag of gold, it was so heavy, so he just flung that bag of gold out first, and helter-skelter started climbing after it. When he came to the bottom, there was his mother picking up gold pieces out of the garden as fast as she could, for of course the bag broke. "Lord a mercy me," she says, "where have you been? It's been raining gold." "No, I haven't," began Jack. "I climbed up." Then he turned and looked for the beanstalk, and it wasn't there at all. So he knew then it was all real magic. After they had lived happily on the gold pieces for a long time, and Jack's father had gotten all sorts of nice things to eat, but one day Jack's mother showed a real sad face as she put the last gold piece in his left hand and told him to be careful when he went to the market, because there wasn't one more gold piece left in their coffer. After that they must starve. That night Jack went to bed without his supper, of his own accord. If he couldn't make money, he thought at any rate he wouldn't eat. It was a shame for such a big boy to stuff himself and bring no food home. He slept like a top, as boys do when they don't overeat themselves, and when he woke, presto! The whole room was green again. There was that curtain of leaves over the window. Another bean had grown in the night, and Jack went up that beanstalk before you could say knife. This time he didn't take nearly so long climbing until he reached the straight white road, and in just a second he found himself before that tall white house, where on the wide white steps there was the ogre's wife standing with the black porridge pot in her hand. This time Jack was as bold as brass. "Good morning, ma'am. I've come to ask you for breakfast, for I've had no supper, and I'm hungry as two hunters." "Go away, you bad boy," replied the ogre's wife. "The last time I gave a boy breakfast, my man missed a whole bag of gold. I think you're the same boy." "Maybe I am, maybe I'm not," said Jack with a laugh. "I'll tell you true when I've had my breakfast, but not till then." So the ogre's wife, who was dreadfully curious, gave him a big bowl of porridge, just like she'd done the last time. But before he'd half finished it, he heard the ogre coming. Thump, thump, thump. "Get in the oven, quick!" shrieked the ogre's wife. "You tell me when he's gone to sleep." This time Jack saw through the steam peephole that the ogre had 3 fat calves hung to his belt. "Better luck today, wife," he cried, and his voice shook the house. "Quick! Roast these trifles for my breakfast. I hope the oven's hot." And he went to feel the handle of the door, but his wife cried out sharply, "Roast? Why, you'd have to wait hours before they were done. I'll broil them. See how bright the fire is?" "Mwah!" roared the ogre, and then he began sniffing, and he cried out, "Fee, fi, fo, fum. I smell he alive, or be he dead, I'll grind his bones to make my bread." "Twaddle," said the ogre's wife. "It's only the bones of the boy you had last week. I've put them in the pig bucket." said the ogre harshly. But he ate the broiled calves, and then he said to his wife, "Bring me my hen that lays the magic eggs. I want to see gold." So the ogre's wife brought him a great big black hen with a shiny red comb. She plumped it down on the table and took away the breakfast things. Then the ogre said to the hen, "Lay!" And promptly it laid. What do you think? A beautiful, shiny, yellow, golden egg. "None so dusty, Henny Penny," laughed the ogre. "I shan't have to beg as long as I've got you." Then he said, "Lay!" once more, and lo and behold, there was another beautiful, shiny, yellow, golden egg. Jack could hardly believe his eyes, and he made up his mind that he would have to have that hen, come what may. So, when the ogre began to doze, just like a flash from the oven, Jack jumped out, seized the hen, and ran for his life. But you see he reckoned without his prize, for hens, you know, always cackle when they leave their nest after laying an egg, and this one set up such a racket that it woke the ogre up. "Where's my hen?" he shouted, and his wife came rushing in, and they both rushed to the door. But Jack had got a good head start, and all they could see was this little figure right away running down that wide white road, holding a great big scrawling, cackling, fluttering black hen by the legs. How Jack got down the beanstalk he never knew. It was all wings and leaves and feathers and cackling, but he got down, and there was his mother wondering if the sky was going to fall. But the very moment Jack touched the ground he called out, "Lay!" and the big black hen stopped cackling and laid a great big shiny yellow golden egg. So everyone was satisfied, and from that moment everyone had everything money could buy. For whenever they wanted anything, they just went over to that old big hen and said, "Lay!" And the big black hen went and provided them with a golden egg. But Jack began to wonder if he couldn't find something else beside money in the sky. So one fine moonlit midsummer night he refused his supper, and before he went to bed he stole out in the garden with a big watering can and watered the ground under his window, for he thought there's at least 2 more beans somewhere, and perhaps it's too dry for them to grow. Then he went to bed and he slept like a top. And lo and behold, when he woke, there was this green light shimmering into his room, and there he was in an instant climbing up that beanstalk, climbing, 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 climbing for all he was worth. But this time he knew better than to ask the ogre's wife for breakfast, 'cause she'd know who he was. So he just hid in some bushes behind the house till he saw her in the scullery. and then he slipped out and hid himself in a copper pan, for he knew he would look in the oven for the first thing, and before too long he heard thump, 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 and peeking through a crack in this copper lid, he could see the ogre stalk in with 3 huge oxen strung to his belt. But this time, no sooner had the ogre got into the house than he began shouting, "Fee, fi, fo, fum! I smell that blood of an Englishman! Be he alive or be he dead, I'll grind his bones to make my bread." For you see the lid on that copper pot didn't fit tight like the oven's door, and ogres can smell like a dog can. "Well, I declare, so do I!" exclaimed the ogre's wife. "It probably is that horrid boy, who stole the bag of gold in the hen. If it is, he's hid in the oven." But when she opened the door, lo and behold, Jack wasn't there, only some joints of meat roasting and sizzling away. Then she laughed and said, "You and me are fools for sure. Why, it's the boy you caught last night that I was getting ready for your breakfast. Yes, we'd be fools to take dead meat for live flesh. So eat your breakfast. There's a good ogre." But the ogre, though he enjoyed roast boy very much, wasn't satisfied, and every now and then he'd burst out with that "fee, fi, fo, fum," and he'd get up and he'd search through the cupboards, keeping Jack in fever of fear, lest he should find it in that copper pot. But he didn't. When he'd finished his breakfast, he called out to his wife, "Bring me my magic harp. I want to be amused. I want to hear some music." So she brought out a little harp and put it on the table, and the ogre leaned back in his chair and said lazily, "Sing." And lo and behold, that harp began to sing. You want to know what it sang about? Why, it sang about everything. It sang so beautifully that Jack forgot to be scared, and the ogre forgot to think of fee, fi, fo, fum, and fell asleep and did not snore. So Jack got out of the copper pot like a mouse, and he crawled on his hands and knees to the table. Then he raised himself up ever so softly and grabbed a hold of that magic harp, because he really had to have it. But no sooner had he touched it than it cried out quite loud, "Master, master!" And the ogre woke up, and he saw Jack taken off with the harp, and he ran after him. My goodness, it was a race. Jack was nimble, but the ogre's stride was twice as long. So although Jack turned and twisted and doubled like a hare, yet at last, when he got to the beanstalk, the ogre was only 12 yards behind him. There wasn't time to think, so Jack just threw himself down onto the stalk and began to go down as fast as he could, while the harp kept calling out, "Master, master," at the very top of its voice. He'd only got down about a quarter of the way when there was the most awful lurch you could think of, and Jack nearly fell off the beanstalk. It was the ogre beginning to climb down, and his weight made the stalk sway like a tree in a storm. Jack knew it was life or death, and he climbed down faster and faster, and as he climbed he yelled, "Mom, Mom, Mom, bring an axe, bring an axe!" Now his mother, as luck would have it, was in the backyard chopping wood, and had an axe right in her hand, and she ran thinking this time that the sky must have fallen. But at that moment Jack touched the ground and flung down the harp, which immediately began to sing all sorts of beautiful things. And he grabbed the axe and gave a great chop of the beanstalk, which shook and swayed and bent like barley before a breeze. "Hey, hey, take care!" yelled the ogre, clinging as hard as he could. But Jack did not take care. He gave that beanstalk such a shrewd blow that the whole of it, ogre and all, came toppling down, and of course the ogre landed on his head, broke his crown, and he died right on the very spot. After that everyone was quite happy, for they had gold, and they had gold to spare. And if their father, who was sick in bed, was feeling kind of bad, Jack just brought in that harp and said, "Sing!" And lo and behold, that harp would sing about everything under the sun. So Jack ceased to be a wondering person, and he became a useful person. And you know what? The last bean It still hasn't grown yet. It's still out there in the garden some. Do you think it'll ever grow? And what do you think they'll find if it does grow and someone crawls up there? What could that child find? I don't know. Do you, Wendy? I don't know.
I don't get.
Well, let me turn the record player off, okay? Did you get that story, Mom? Mm-hmm.